Greetings everyone, I'm Yarlik, and today I would like to share with you my latest TAS, which is The Floor is Lava. So our goal here today is to stay off the ground as much as possible. Now, early game, obviously that's a bit of a problem. We don't have many tools to stay off the ground, so we pogo where we can. But you can see in the upper right that we are accumulating some ground touches. That top area is the number of frames we've spent on the ground, and the bottom is the number of times we've touched the ground, which right now is the same thing, because we only ever touch the ground one frame at a time. And you can see as we bounce across there, then one of our touches there. And then here, we can use these spikes to pogo up like a little ladder. And that works pretty well. You can stay off the ground here. And then while we do the door here, we can wiggle a little bit to slow our fall speed and minimize how many times we touch the ground. So you can see that with the frames and touches, the left number is the number in the current room, and the right number is the number in total. And so that can give you an idea of how well TAS is doing for each room. This room is pretty similar to the normal pass, just a lot of time jumping, just because Dirtmouth already has issues with staying on the ground. So this room is fun. We're able to do it with one extra touch and make it through. Now, here is why we picked up some lifeblood earlier. We want to kill this boulder, and so we're going to do this itemless boulder skip, which uses the knockback from the spit to get close to the boulder, and then we're jumping in between, and then pogoing off the boulder sometimes for RNG manipulation, because we need to make sure those spits happen at just the right location. Normally you'd do this trick with Fury, but with Fury, there would be the time on the ground to pick up Fury, and there would also be time required to heal between the attacks, and the healing time would also be on the ground. So that's not really viable, thus why we got the lifeblood. And you can see that we had a few extra frames versus touches there, and that has to do with freeze frames. Now here, unfortunately, there are a lot of background objects in Green Path that we can't actually pogo. They're kind of fake outs. So you can try to pogo them, but you don't actually get any height. Here we have to do the squid skip. Eric will help us up, since we don't have VS. VS is actually very expensive to pick up in terms of grounded time. That's part of the reason why we decided to omit it from the route. That, and we want to get dash as quickly as possible, because dash is going to be a very powerful tool for staying off of the ground. Here we're going to do a aesthetic splash, and that allows us to get up there without too many grounded frames. And then here we can take advantage of enemies a little bit to take at least a little bit of time left off the ground. Now this fight's very interesting because we're going to have to do the fight basically with pogos, which makes it a little bit different from the usual fight, but still not too difficult. Lots of weird little hops all over the place here. Now here again we can use some enemy pogos to save a little bit of grounded time. Here we didn't really have any ability to use the pogos because it puts us too high to really benefit from it anyways. But we're still able to use a little bit of an extra knockback momentum to reduce our time on the ground. Now this part's funny. We can take advantage of this enemy and we can pogo them multiple times to save some grounded frames. And then we're finally on to the Hornet fight. Now the Hornet fight is interesting. So the first thing you'll notice here is that we jump as high as possible so that we don't have too many ground frames. We're falling during part of that dialogue. And then for the fight itself, we just pogo as much as possible, which is pretty much all the time. Lots of RNG manipulation going on here to make sure that her attacks are compatible with what we're doing. That part's a little bit fun. And then now we're going to hop and use wiggles to fine-tune our timing so that we can pick it up at exactly the last or first possible frame. Now we do accumulate a bunch of grounded frames here because of the fact that we have to do a pickup, but that's just unavoidable. We need dash. Without dash, the rest of the game would have way too many touches. So you can see here that now that we can dash, we can spend a lot less time on the ground. And we're maximizing our distance. Oh, here, hey, that was convenient. Saved a little bit of ground touch there. Because dash allows us to stay off the ground for longer, we can basically jump and then halfway through our fall we can dash. And that gives us maximum distance from each dash, basically. This is interesting with minimal floor touches. We're able to delay a little bit with the dash there while we're waiting for the gate to open. And now we're going to do fungal movement, which is a little bit different than usual fungal movement. Because we can't dash off of the ledges directly, we have to tweak the movement a little bit to try to avoid time touching the ground, because a dash off of the ground actually accumulates dash frames during the whole time you're dashing near the ground. And here we can take advantage of these enemies. And this room, we unfortunately have quite a few touches, just because it's such a long horizontal room. And we don't have any tools yet for that kind of traversal. We will soon, once we get Claw, but for now, we have to deal with what we got. Here we're able to do pretty efficient movement, so only a couple touches. This room, we're actually able to stay off the ground entirely, other than the one frame on entry, which is kind of fun. So this is E-Pogo, and we just bounce, and then Pogo the explosion. Very handy. And now we finally get to head into the Claw room. Now, Claw, this is a little bit tricky, so we managed to stay off the ground there, if you'll notice. We haven't gotten any grounded frames yet. We're able to Pogo all these things, but now we have to get a few grounded frames, just because that's the only way to jump up there. But we're delaying as much as possible with these Pogos and these wiggles, and finally we get the early control. And so we don't get too many grounded frames, and now we have wall cling storage. And that changes everything, because we can get wiggle wall cling storage off of these walls and then use that to traverse horizontally. And thankfully, Pogoing retains your wall cling storage, and so we can use that to extend pretty far. There we use a little cheeky Pogo off of the nail. And now we're going to head down and we're going to go grab Dash Master. Now, there is some pickup time for Dash Master, but it's not as long as you'd think, because we can use this enemy to get early control. And just like this, you can see that we only got 41 grounded frames for that. And that is well worth it, because Dash Master is incredibly powerful. It allows us to dash more often while we're in the air with wall cling storage, which normally doesn't matter, but in this case allows us to stay off the ground for much longer. And it's also going to be important for a couple of the skips that we do later. So it's a very important thing to get. Now we can't equip it right away because benches are also grounded time. And so we want to use benches as little as possible. So instead of using a bench to get back up, we are going to climb up. And we have a couple of things we want to do along the way. So one of the things we want to do is we want to go through this path through fungal. We have to get one ground touch there, but otherwise we're able to stay off of the ground. And there's actually a very interesting trick here. So in this hallway, we need to delay a little bit because we're waiting for that enemy, and then we can pogo the enemy and use WCS to get through there without an extra touch. Very tricky and precise little thing. So one of the things we want to do here is we're going to be going through the Shrimal Ogre's room, which may seem a little weird because it takes a while to fight them. However, there is actually a gate in the Shrimal Ogre's room that we're able to open. That one up there. So right now we have to go around, but we're actually going to come through this room again later. And so we can open this gate now, which will save us a little bit of time later. And more importantly, it saves us a transition, which saves us grounded time. So now we do this fight. You can pogo them while they're headbanging, and you can also side slash them off of the wall. So we're using a combination of those two techniques to kill these guys without touching the floor. And we're not killing any of the children yet, because we're going to need them. So we pogo this guy until he's dead, and then we make our way back across. And then we kind of stall in the air there on the left side because we want the children to go to the right. And we use the children to pogo our way across. And now we do a funny little climb where we can only touch the sides of walls and never touch the floor, which results in some very funny looking movement. And now we're headed back up to Crossroads. Now, we have a couple of interesting things we want to do here. So ultimately, we're going to want to get Dream Nail, so we need to get across to Resting Grounds, and we're going to do that using a Shade Skip. Standard blue like Shade Skip, except we want to set everything up without touching the ground. So here, we use Welcoming Storage again to make our way across. We had one extra touch early in the room there that we couldn't avoid just because of the nature of that hallway, but it's not too bad. And then through here. Now this room is interesting. We don't have Dash Master equipped yet, so we have to use the ceiling, which has some wall segments, to make our way up there and around. And now we can fight Grossmother. This fight can be done without touching the ground, no problem. Just keep pogoing. Now the children are interesting, because we're going to have to pogo the children. So we do a little RNG manipulation here, and then we line things up for a side slash off the wall. They're going to take 2 hits because we don't have Fury, but that's okay. And we actually damage Stink there because we're going to want to die. And we're dying so that we can set up a Shade Skip. So we're just going to leave our Shade there, and we're going to come back for that. This conveniently gives us a chance to... so we're saving and quitting here because we need to load into the bench without being grounded. And you have to save and quit to do that. And specifically, it only works with some benches, and that bench in Dirtmouth, very thankfully, does work. Sadly, we can't use Menderbug again, but that's okay, because we have Welcoming Storage now. So now here, we're going to head down, and we're going to want to do the Shade Skip, but we actually need one more thing first. And this might sound a little bit weird, but we need Glowing Womb. And the reason we need Glowing Womb is that it's going to allow us to do some skips later. Or rather, it's going to make certain skips legal by virtue of making them a Shade Skip that we could do, which then allows us to use Wall-Cling Storage instead. The rules surrounding Wall-Cling Storage are done. So we climb up here, and we're going to head over and go get Glowing Womb. We have to open this wall awkwardly. But then we can Wall-Cling Storage through here, which is nice and easy with Dash Master. That is legal because you can do that without Wall-Cling Storage as well. And then we make our way into here. And we have to do the fight without touching the ground. Yeah, not too big of a deal. Just kind of dash our way around, bounce around, get Wall-Cling Storage every now and then. And one trick here is that we want to get early control for the pickup. And so we're manipulating things here to set that up. So you see how we have those little enemies there? Now we delay as much as possible, and then pick it up, and then boom, on first frame we get control. So we only got a total of 58 frames there, which is not bad. Then make our way back through again. And we won't equip Glowing Womb because we don't need it until we do some of the skips later. But we have it ready for when we need it. And now we can finally go do the Shade Skip. And by Shade Skip, I mean we're going to skip the Shade Skip. Because by virtue of the Shade existing, that allows us to use Wall-Cling Storage to get across. And we don't actually care about killing the Shade because we have neither... we have a need of neither Soul nor Geo. Now here is a cheeky Wall-Cling Storage. It is actually possible to use an enemy pogo to get up there, so this is topologically legal, but it is a very silly skip. And as you can see the power of Dash Master in terms of allowing us to make more horizontal traversal. Now here we head our way through resting grounds. We use pogos where we can, and then make our way across. We jumped into the air there to try to minimize how long we're spending on the ground, but we're still going to spend a lot of time on the ground through this cutscene. Unfortunately, this is a non-skippable cutscene, and there's going to be even more of them involved in Dreamnail, so we accumulate a ton of our ground frames in this particular segment. Now we wake up here, get off the ground as soon as we can, and then we're just going to pogo and wait for the seer. Now normally on this patch you would actually fall off the edge to make the seer spawn faster, but we can't do that because that would require more wake up time, which is more grounded frames. So we just have to wait. And then we use a little bit of wall cling storage, which we try to stay above the platforms to keep it topologically legal. And then where needed we just start bouncing off of the sides of platforms again as well. And then finally we make it to the end, and then we do a little hop here, and then grab the Dreamnail. And as before, we have a very long cutscene, and this cutscene is grounded, which we can't avoid, unfortunately. But now we can do Seer Skip. Now this is weird Seer Skip, because normally in Seer Skip you would just dash, but we have to jump instead, because we want to stay off the ground in there. And then we WCS across this room. And now we can make our way down to City. Continue to abuse wall clink storage with Dash Master to zoom across rooms. And then here, this elevator, you can actually stay off of the ground pretty easily. Fun fact, if you actually cross the threshold while you're wall clinging, you actually lose the ability to wall cling completely. So you have to be careful to not actually be clinging the wall when you go through the transition. Very funny little glitch there. Now here, we are going to start heading over to Kingdom's Edge. And you might ask, why are we going to Kingdom's Edge? We don't really have anything that we would need over here for an 90% run. Well, that's not quite the case. You see, I mentioned previously that not all benches allow you to load in without being grounded after a save and quit. And that's because some benches are closer to the ground than others. When Team Cherry placed the benches, they just kind of placed them without worrying about the exact vertical height. And what that means is certain benches will be grounded even if you save and quit and load onto them. Now thankfully, Oro Bench, which is where we're going, is nice and high off of the ground, which means that that bench is one we can load into with very little grounded time. So we're going to be using this bench as our primary bench for the additional shade skips that we're going to want to do down here. And there's 2 more shade skips we're going to do, so we're going to be making this trek back several times, which thankfully is not too difficult thanks to the wall clink storage. Now we do take a hit there. We're going to be using that damage tank to set up for the shade skip, or the shade death later, because we need to die to leave a shade. So we might as well take a hit now. It'll save a little time later. This room's kind of fun in reverse, as we have to activate this guy, then dash under there. Lots of fun movement. So now this movement is fun. We're going to go through the bottom here, and we're going to make our way across, and then thankfully there's a guy we can pogo here to restore our height, and then keep going. So now we're going to head down the broken elevator. We could use some inventory drops to do that. And then we rub the wall very briefly and use it to dash in. Now here we can wall cling storage across this room. And then we can pogo off. Actually, we didn't have to pogo that. It means this one we pogo. Yeah. Or no, we don't pogo that one either. We go through this room twice, so I forget. But we do take a damage tank, which again is to set us up for later and again. And then now we can head into this room. Now here, ultimately we want to get to wings, but in order to get to wings, we need to do a shade skip because we don't have C-dash. So that is exactly far enough to set up our shade. And now, in order to get wings, we get to go back there, which means we get to start from Kingdom's Edge once again. But first, we're going to go ahead and use this bench time to equip Glowing Womb, because Glowing Womb is actually necessary for this shade skin. So normally the way this would work is you would use the Glowing Woundling to activate the shade, and then you can pogo the shade to get out of the spikes. And there's a couple different ways to activate the shade, but Glowing Womb is one of the more interesting ones. And it's one that we can get with an early control, which is why we're using it. Now, we're not actually going to do the shade skip because we have wall cling storage, and the existence of the shade makes it legal, but that's just a technicality. Climb our way up here, just like before. Slightly different paths just for fun. And make it through here again. So this path through is essentially the same movement. We're going to do this one more time actually with wings. And the wings path is a little bit different because you have a little bit of extra movement. We take a slightly different path again here. This one doesn't require us to pogo that guy since we used a wall instead. And then here we can do some inventory drops. Slightly different ones. And head through here. Now here, we actually have to pogo that guy because his position was slightly different. If you were doing a C-dash, that would actually just get you hit, but thankfully, because it's wall cling storage, we have more flexibility. We did some down dashes there for a little bit of swag, and it is slightly faster. And here we didn't take a hit, because we no longer need to be on low health here. Instead, we can just head across. And then we actually do kill the shade there, but that's just incidental. We needed to pogo it to stay off of the ground. So this is a fun little sequence to do without touching the floor, because there's some narrow hallways here. But thankfully there are things to pogo, and Dashmaster wall cling storage, again, is just incredibly powerful for this horizontal traversal. We just kind of navigate the gauntlet there. Do little cheeky wall jumps to stay off of the ground. And then there's some pogos there we can do, and so we only had one touch that whole room. And we'll be able to do the same thing in this room as well. We have to use a little bit of wall up there to get further over, but that's not a big deal. And now we just wait for the boss to activate. You might notice that the Woomlings here like to chase after the light seeds. So they're having some fun. And then we jumped there to stay off the ground during the scream. And now we can fight Lost Kid without touching the ground. Or not Lost Kid, Broken Vessel. Thankfully we don't have to fight Lost Kid in this run, because with only Nail Zero and Glowing Womb, that would take a very long time. The fight itself is fairly straightforward, but lots of funny little dodges back and forth. Because with Dashmaster, you can actually interleave your attacks and dashes, which allows you to pogo without gaining too much height. And we're going to use that extensively for all the boss fights, to keep pogoing without having to wait between our attacks so much. And now we can get wings. Now unfortunately we did have to have an extra touch there, because that was a fairly long section without a wall cling storage available. But now, with wings, there are going to be very few rooms where we actually have to take an extra touch. Unfortunately, there is no early control here, so we do lose some grounded frames to that, but it's still well worth it, because wings is going to allow us to get Ismas, which in turn will allow us to do Monomon. The shortcut here. The Woomlings go and kill things just because they like doing that. Yeah, I mean, not having C-dash there does make the room take a little longer, but Wall clink storage with Dash Master is pretty good. And now we're doing our fun insta-wings, which allows us to do the wings without the wings dip. And we're going to be doing that everywhere, because TAS loves to do that. It is a frame-perfect trick, or close to frame-perfect. So humans can do it, but it's something that's very difficult, and not many humans go for it. And then now, we are going to set up another shade skip. And this is going to be a shade skip that we need to get to Isthmus later. So first we're going to get to 1 health off of the worms, and then we're going to dive into the acid. So now we have a shade in the Isthmus room, and we're going to use that later to justify a wall clink storage skip into Isthmus. But before we go to Isthmus, we are going to head over and grab Lurian, since Lurian is kind of on the way. So now we can make it Isthmus room with wings, which allows us to do a little bit faster traversal in some parts. But mostly is the same as the previous times we went through this room, since most of it's horizontal. However, it is going to make this room a lot more interesting, because insta-wings means you can climb very efficiently. Just like that. Fun little close dodge of those veg flies. So again, we're heading across here, but this time instead of going down, we are going to head up towards Upper Spire. We can make our way around this elevator, and then make our way up here. Now with wings, we can stay off the ground easily. We get the lever skip, and then we climb our way through there in the dark. Here we want to stay on the wall as much as possible because we don't want the elevator to ground us. And now we're going to do a fun chandelier skip here. Or not skip, but the chandelier without touching the ground, which is kind of fun. Now this fight without touching the ground is very interesting. The Watchers do have a fair amount of health, and they become invulnerable to the nail when they're rolling, which makes it awkward. So we try to net for as little rolling as possible, but it's not possible to completely avoid it. But it's not too bad, and the Wooblings do help out a little bit. They do 9 damage each, which isn't much, but it's something. Now we're going to have 2 Watchers at the same time, which gives us more flexibility because we can switch between them whenever one is rolling. And when possible, we can stack them on top of each other. That's a little bit tricky to manipulate for, but here you can see, for example, we've got them so they're on top of each other, and so we're hitting both of them, which is nice. Here we can actually down dash between them. There's a very tiny window between their hitboxes that we can squeeze into. And then we just keep doing that. Here we have to pogo off of his ball form briefly to stay off the ground. Overall, the fight is pretty straightforward. Just a lot of manipulation and a lot of dashing back and forth. And pogoing. Where possible, we can use the wall where we can dash into the wall and then pogo off of it after dashing. Otherwise, if we're in the middle of the room, we just have to pogo and dash, pogo and dash. And that's it. We wait for the gate to open, which takes forever, and then we can start heading our way up here. You can see that we kind of squeezed against the wall there, and then use that to get wall clink storage. Basically, TAS can get wall clink storage by wiggling past any wall. And so you'll see several times where we just kind of push our way past a wall, and suddenly we have wall clink storage. And it just uses that everywhere. Now here, watch carefully. Lurian's Butler is useful. We got early control, which allowed us to get off of the ground while we were waiting for the dream to load in. Now, unfortunately, the dreamers themselves, we can avoid the ground during this part, but during the focus, we have to be grounded. So every dreamer is going to give us quite a few grounded frames just by virtue of the cutscene here. Most of it can't be avoided, but we can quit out for part of the cutscene. which we do. We do unfortunately accumulate some grounded frames in the menu, which is annoying, but you can't really avoid it. It's because we're spawning on the ground here. But now we can make our way back out, which thankfully is fairly straightforward. Now here, we are heading down to get Ismas, which thankfully we've already set up our shade. Fun fact, when I was first putting this together, I actually forgot to do this part of the sequence when I set up the route. And I had actually tried to do the shades setup after Lurien, which respawned us at the Lurien location instead, which has more grounded frames than Orobench. So we delay and then pick it up just as the Horp gets to us. Now, fun thing, when you pick up Ismas and you get early control like this, you have the bubbles chasing you. And because we don't quit out again, these bubbles are going to keep chasing us until we get to Hera, when we finally do a quit out. So now we get to do through waterways with the bubbles chasing us, which I think is kind of fun. Waterways has a lot of interesting movement because there's a lot of different things that we can pogo. And we take advantage of that where we can. And basically they allow us to make these narrow hallways possible, because otherwise we'd probably have to touch the ground to refresh. So conveniently there are quite a few enemies around. This part's fun because we get to pogo, or not pogo, but make our way under there and use the walls to refresh, which is quite tight actually. And here's where we do the pogos. We could use these annoying fluke things, which thankfully we outrun. Here, rather than fight the arena, we use a lever skip, which is extremely tight, but it is possible. And now we're climbing our way back up through Fungal. And so you might wonder, well, why are we over here anyways? The reason we're over here is that we want to go to Hera. And the fastest way to get there is walking through, or flying, I suppose, through waterways to get to Fungal, and then from Fungal go to libTAS. Now, interestingly, we're actually going to go to Fungal Core rather than going through the Sportium entrance. And the reason we're going through Core is because this is actually fewer transitions. And some of the transitions we don't have any touches because we get control in midair. And so even though this actually does have a couple of walls or floors that we have to step through, it still ends up saving ground touches over going the other way. Now, Deep Nest is a very spicy area for minimum grounded because there are so many narrow passageways. This one's not too bad, since the passageways have things we can pogo. But later we're going to see some that are a lot tighter. That one's no problem. Now, here's where things become a problem. We do have to get a couple touches in there, however, we're able to get through that enemy with only a single damage tank, which is good because we only had enough health for a single damage tank. Normally that guy takes 2 damage tanks. And we're able to stay off of the ground pretty well through here. Even though there are these narrow passageways, there are things we can pogo to help. That required some RNG manipulation to get that enemy into the right place. Otherwise they would block you normally, and you'd have to either damage tank or kill them. And then here, we can make it through these fun little segments with spikes. The spikes are actually extremely useful because they allow us to pogo them and continue to avoid the floor. This room is a little bit tricky, but not too bad. Again, the spikes in the enemies help us to pogo along and keep making progress. Now, there's one more floor we have to touch here, unfortunately. But we can touch it just for one frame. And here we can actually pogo the spikes through the floor, which allows us to make it through that room without any extra touches. Now you have to do a little bit of awkwardness there to avoid touching the platforms. Normally you would climb up onto the platform and then wings jump from there, but we have to do it from the wall, which makes it a little more awkward. Now here, there's a little bit of an obstacle. We need to make it through the devout, and we only have nail 0 and glowing loom. So we're just gonna have to fight this guy, which is a little bit awkward when you have spells and you have to use nail swings only without touching the floor. So we just kind of cheese it, get underneath it, get above it. Now, unfortunately, on this patch, he's actually going to respawn. You might have noticed that we did a reverse dream nail drop there. And that's a little trick where you can use the recoil and the direction lock of your nail to then start dream nailing while you're falling. And that saves a little bit of grounded frames. And as before, we do accumulate a fair number of grounded frames here from the focus, but very few actual touches. So now, we're going to load in. We're going to be at Hera. We use Dream Nail early control to avoid being on the ground for too long. And then we have to fight this guy again, because this is patch 1221. And on this patch, the Devout respawns. But we have some pogos we can make it through there with. And now we can hit our way down and back out. You notice that we didn't take the shortcut that uses the damageable floor, because that would have taken an extra ground touch. We actually pogo the spikes twice there because we needed to get a little bit more distance over. Because we didn't have wall cling storage there, we just had to deal with regular pogos, dashes, and wings. So here, we need to start making our way up to Monomon. And the way up to Monomon is going to be through Queen's Gardens. This is the lower part of Queen's Gardens. So we just do lots of insta-wings, lots of pogos, all sorts of fun stuff. We're going to squeeze past some thorns there, and just keep climbing our way up. Insta-winging the whole way. We knock that guy back to make a little bit of space to make our way through. And now we can just head through this room. This room's a little bit funny because we can't wall cling those platforms. So we're going to have to use the walls to basically give us wall cling storage to allow us to make it through. And then we just have this one more room we got to go through, make it over, cross through here, and then now we're on our way to Fungal again. So this room is actually an awkward one to get through going the other way because of that area there with no ability to get wall cling storage, but from that direction it's not too bad. Because we have wall cling storage that we can get off of that little ledge there. And so here we're making it up to the Shroomel's room that we opened up the door in previously. And thankfully, with wings, this room is a cinch. We've already been through here before with less movement, and so with more movement it's even easier. This is a little awkward here, but we make it through there, and then we come up. Thankfully we don't have to fight the Shroomels again. We can just poke them, and we no longer need the Shroomlings to get through there because we have wings. So now we awkwardly make our way through here, and then we can take this shortcut to get over to the location where Monomon is at. Fog Canyon, that's what it's called. Fall through here, quick inventory drop and across. The Womblings helpfully set off explosions for us. The Womblings are going to be creating some problems for us here. But it's TAS, so we can deal with it. And thankfully there's a wall there we can use to get WCS, so we can make it through without extra touches. we can make it through here. Now, here's the moment that everyone has been waiting for. You may have seen this in the any percent TAS by constructive cynicism. The Uma core is enough damage to kill Umu in one hit. The tricky thing, though, is that we need to keep it alive that entire time. And even more interesting, you might notice that one of the Woomlings is kind of chasing it. Yeah, the Woomlings can aggro it, and if they catch it, it will explode. So we're not only avoiding the walls here, we're also manipulating the orbit so that the Woomling can't catch it. And that was not easy. Boom. There we go. See, it was easy. All you have to do is carry a core in there and then dodge it for however long it takes. So we're going to head across here. Now, these cutscenes take a long time. So we're not going to wait for the entire cutscene. We're going to need to talk to Quirrell next, and we're going to need to wait for him to do his whole animation. But rather than wait, what if we just grab another little helpful core? And we just take that core, and we lure it all the way down. We get stuck a little bit here because it's a very awkward spot to get it through that narrow passageway. But then we head down here, and we lure it down here, lure it over here, lure it down with us to the acid, lure it over here, make our way through this little narrow area, which is quite tricky, especially because Woomling's still chasing it. Talk to Quirrell and boom. Now, technically this is actually considered a major glitch because we got text storage. But it's fun, so we're gonna leave it in. We used the Dream Nail, and we did a Dream Nail drop there again, just like we did for the other two Dreamers, which allowed us to open it up sooner. And then now we focus and accumulate some more mandatory grounded frames. So we're pretty close to the end here. That's all the Dreamers. So now all we need to do is climb up to THK. Do lots of insta-wings. Always fun. Now this was actually a little bit tricky. We had to use that pogo there to get enough height to make it over. And then we make it through here. You can see that our Woomlings are being helpful as always. We unfortunately get a little bit when we had to pogo that enemy. They don't set off any major explosions here, so that's not a big deal. Climb up here through the acid. And we're back at Crossroads. It's infected Crossroads, but not too big of a deal. As you can see at this point, we're pretty much always just one touch per room. And that's just the one touch you can't avoid when you first enter the room. Lots of pogos through here. Thankfully there's all these infection bubbles everywhere, and those help us to make it through. And we're here, Black Cake Temple. We jump as high as we can to allow some of the animation time to overlap. But unfortunately, this is just a very, 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 very long animation. Here, we can actually climb up to the walls on the ceiling, and we can use that to wall cling storage our way across the room. As always, Dash Master wall cling storage is ridiculous. Now here, how are we going to get these chains? Well, of course, we can use wall cling storage. There we go, all the chains without touching the ground. Now THK, we need to wait for him to set up the screen. Then we're going to dash over, be in the air, and then delay landing as much as possible. Once the screen is done, now we're going to poke him. And you might notice that we're dashing back and forth, and a lot of the times he's getting very confused. He's not sure what to do. because he keeps changing his facing direction to try to follow us. And because of that, it delays his AI. They just keep going back and forth and back and forth. And we repeat this for a fair while until eventually he gets his health low enough that he's going to scream. And then once he does, we're going to do a scream skip. It takes a while because we have only nail 0 here, and the woundlings are helping, but they're only 9 damage, so they don't help that much. Okay, so scream 1 done. We actually skipped the first scream, because that scream is optional. But the second scream, unfortunately, is not. This is a little bit fun, because now he has some actions he can do that we can't delay forever. And so we have to kind of follow along as he does these leaps, which is actually quite tricky. That's a very fast-moving attack, and so keeping up the nail swings while that's happening is not easy. But it's TAS, so we have the ability. Yet more manipulation, final scream skip. We just keep it up. Just a little bit more to go. And that's it. Stay off the ground as long as we can, and then start to focus. And as with the other focuses, we do have some unavoidable frames here. But it's not too bad. And there we go. A very total of 7,589 frames out of 250,000 frames in 42 minutes, 35 seconds. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe. It helps a lot. And if you are feeling generous, there is a super thanks feature available on the channel.